and welcome to my channel. I am Zodiac Bandit, and today we're going to be recapping the second part of the Mighty Nein Reunion, or Mighty Nein Reunite, I forget what they called it, but this was excellent, it was really fun, so let's get right into it and start off with the battle between the Scions, not the Psychons, and the Giant versus the Mighty Nein outside of the temple to start with. So the battle starts, and Bo runs up to one of the Scions and throws two of her daggers, but only one hits, dealing some good damage. Veth then casts Hypnotic Pattern, mostly hitting Scions once again. And then Ford puts Hexblade's Curse on the Mage Scion, then hits it with 3 of his 4 Eldritch Blasts. The Storm Giant then runs up to the top of the temple with the Mage on his shoulder, and slams his fist down on top of it. Yasha rages and runs toward the Giant. Yasha returned her Holy Avenger to Kima after the events of Campaign 2, but now has a new sword, the Scald Saber, which she pulls out as she runs toward the Giant, but that ends her turn. Jester then slams her hands to the ground, casting Earthquake. This hits the Giant, Yasha, Veth, and Kingsley, as they're all on the temple already. Yasha and the Giant both take 12 damage, as they failed their rolls and are knocked prone. The Giant falls on top of Yasha, restraining her. The Mage is able to maneuver themselves off or on top of the Giant to avoid damage. The Mage then casts a spell on himself, trying to escape and jump down into the hole that was created by the Giant, but Ford casts Counterspell at 5th level because Warlock. The Mage still jumps down, but we hear him take some fall damage. More of the temple begins to be revealed as the earthquake continues to move the ground around it. Caleb then casts Disintegrate on the Giant, which fails its roll, dealing 76 damage, and it also took 15 damage from his Lightning Boots. 103 damage to the Giant so far. And due to Veth, most of the Scions are now useless for their turn. One of them moves up to the temple, and one of them moves up to Bo and swings at her, but in the process each eats 2 counter punches from Bo. Kingsley then walks up to the Giant's head and stabs it in its ear with a natural 20, giving it sneak attack, plus its Bloodhunter stuff, dealing 51 damage. Total so far, unless I missed something, was 154 damage. Kingsley then attacks again, dealing 16, totaling to 170 damage onto the Giant. Bo then turns, Bo's turn again. She dashes after the Mage and jumps into the hole. She's able to slow fall and lands about 15 feet away from the Mage and doesn't take any fall damage because cool monk shit. She pulls out her staff and sends a sound wave or a shockwave towards the Mage, dealing 13 damage and pushes it up against the wall. Veth is now up and sees the Giant's junk, as it doesn't wear any underwear. Veth shoots it and gets sneak attack. That's an image and feeling I don't ever want again. Dealing 46 damage in that hit. The Giant has now taken 216 damage so far, and you will see why my efforts to keep track of the Giant's damage will be worthless very soon. Veth then jumps down the hole, and snakes begin to emerge as Veth lands and is able to do some cool rogue shit. More snakes emerge because of the light down there now, and everyone remembers the whole light situation within the temple. Ford then casts Fly on himself and then teleports down to the Mage because of his Hex Blade abilities. The Giant's turn, he stands up, and the ground holds beneath him for now. The Giant then slams his fists into the temple, making the temple and the ground around him crumble down into the hole. The floor in which everyone down there already was standing on gives way because of all the extra weight coming down on top of it. Caleb also falls, but is able to use Feather Fall to land softly. Veth, Ford, Bo, and Caleb all stop their fall damage as they continue to fall past their initial landing point. The Giant is looking very rough, and I have now lost all track of damage because Matt didn't reveal the damage of the falling, which made all my efforts worthless, which is very sad to me. Matt then adds a bunch of rocks and stones to the map, which was really cool, and salt bays some of the stones down on top of it. Yasha, still up top, draws out her wings and begins to fly down the hole and lands, or begins to hover just above the giant. And she gives out a battle cry, giving everyone advantage on attacks and saving throws for the next turn. Jester's turn, and her and Kingsley are still up top, the only two still up top. Jester thinks about dimension dooring down, but doesn't know how far it is. And she moves toward Kingsley and tells Kingsley to run to her, and then they will dimension down once he tells her how far down everything is. Her earthquake goes off once more. The giant fails. Caleb goes prone as well, as he also fails. It's the mage's turn. He tries to dimension door himself out, but it doesn't work as Ford counterspells him yet again. Counterspell is best spell. The mage then starts moving towards something. It's unclear what they're moving toward as of right now. Caleb stands up and gets ready to cast something and tells Bo to punch the mage. The scions do nothing again, except nothing. They're worthless as of right now. Kingsley runs to Jester. Jester holding Dimension Door as her action, and teleports directly onto the giant's head. Kingsley attacks the mage, but misses the first, and the mage shields the second strike. Bo jumps the giant, elbowing it in the ribs as she goes over it, and using some key points, makes it weak to fire. Then jumps to the mage, and does the same thing with a flurry of blows to the mage, stunning it, or attempting a stunning strike, but it makes it save. It is now also weak to fire. Caleb then, holding his action, casts Web of Fire and hits basically everything that landed down there. Veth's turn. She shoots the giant again, dealing 40 points of damage, killing the fucking giant. Veth hated this giant. It seems Veth, the small creature, likes killing big things. Ford then shoots 4 Eldritch Blasts at the mage, 1 being a crit. The mage is now absolutely fucked up. Ford then flies behind the said mage, flanking it with Bo, and tells it to give him the Cloven Crystal. Yasha then flies down to the mage as well, and attacks, the first one dealing tons of damage, and the second one dealing even more, killing the mage. And then cuts its head off after it's already dead, because Murder Hobo is going to murder Hobo. Except it's already dead, because it's not really murder hoboing at that point. Pointless violence. Let's go for that, because it's dead already. I guess it's that Zombieland trope. Double tap. Double tap. Wow. Anyway, they start looking for the crystal after it's dead. Jester begins to look around for the Cloven Crystal and sees many snakes and 1 scion still standing after the Web of Fire. Then casts Guiding Bolt on it, hurting it a bit more. She then ends her Earthquake, which stops the temple from shaking, and it holds firm. Caleb's go. He firebolts the scion, wasting the Guiding Bolt a bit, because, I don't know, Firebolt seemed kind of shitty. I don't know, something about that just seemed really lame to me. Anyway, after that, more scions jump down as Veth no longer had her hypnotic pattern affecting them because she used a different concentration spell. They then start ripping up the floor, and yellowish green energy, begins to fill the room. As more of the detail is shown in the room, we see the story of the creator of Uk'otoa, Zahir, and they realize that they are now in Zahir's temple. With ease, they finish off the rest of the scions, and Ford feels the darkness as the last seal has been broken. In the room, there is a serpent statue with 3 heads, and its eyes are glowing, and the snakes all look toward the party. Ford tries to open a portal, but it fails, as the dark entity here wants answers. The snakes move out of the way of the party as they move to the middle of the room. Ford walks to the statue of Zahir. The head of these snakes begin to follow his movement. Ford asks Zahir what he wants. Zahir wants Uk'otoa and wants Ford, as Ford has Uk'otoa's mark within him. He then calls Uk'otoa a false god, and Caleb says he can't go anywhere, but they can, and if he needs someone to get his pet, they will, in a very threatening way. But Zahir just laughs at him. Ford explains what brought them there, and says that they are allies in this instance. Zahir asks for a pact to know that this partnership is true, and he'll be able to punish the Chosen One if it is indeed a false partnership. Zahir says the Chosen will be marked and granted a boon with said mark, and the mark will remain with them until they are done with his mind, as he put it. Kingsley steps up, but everyone kind of doesn't like this idea, as they kind of just got a second lease on life, and jumping into something like that would be kind of dangerous for them. Ford says he'll do it, and Kingsley sort of backs off, as Kingsley kind of wanted Ford to do it. Ford says he needs to finish this business and accepts the pact. Ford sees the statue's head move towards him, and the sunlight begins to fade. He feels similar to how Uk'otoa used to make him feel back during Campaign 2, but he also sees a green flame. Do you choose to embrace the shadow, or do you climb the mountain? Ford chooses to climb the mountain. The statue crumbles, and there is a sword within. The Fang of the Spire King. The Fang of the Spire King. Ford gives it to Kingsley and tells him not to jump so willingly into a pact like that. It could be kind of dangerous. Ford then feels the dark presence of Uk'otoa in the south. They then teleport to Nicodranas and see that there are tons of ships leaving, going toward a massive storm. Ford feels Uk'otoa in that direction. They hire a ship owned by a captain from Campaign 1 who took the crew of Vox Machina to the Water Ashari. Caleb goes to Yusa and asks for some help. Yusa gives him a bag with potions in it and, praises him for taking accountability in a situation like this, as some people wouldn't. The rest of the crew then rest up, and they travel towards the storm. Kingsley asks Bo about Mollymauk and Lucian and if he is like them. Bo kind of says yes, but she also says that she believes there's plenty of Ford and Jester in him, as he is the product of nature and nurture. Kingsley questions the path of his old selves, and then takes a bottle of wine and leaves. The next day they come up on the storm. Everyone prepares for battle. Major prep. Ford casts water breathing on everybody. Jester casts water walk on everybody, and then casts control weather to reduce the storm a little bit, and helps the ship navigate towards said storm. The Nine watch as ship after ship fall to massive waves. They all then hear a voice of Uk'otoa, who says he wants them to feed his anger, and he shows himself in his massive form. Matt reveals a map, a triangle water map, which was freaking massive. It was actually huge. And reveals that there are 3 body pieces for Uk'otoa and 1 massive head piece. The body is covered in scales and eyeballs, and there's 1 massive eyeball in the central on the head. He then hits the ship with a massive tidal wave, hitting everyone, dealing a ton of damage to start with. I believe it was 46 if he failed. Jester loses her control weather at this point, but the damage of that spell has already been done, as it has now reduced most of the layer actions for Uk'otoa. Ford then flies out to one of the body pieces. He cuts it up and then puts Hexblade Curse on it afterwards because he forgot to do it first. Uk'otoa questions why he can't take away the gift from Ford that he gave him. Bo then jumps onto the head and starts punching it and learns that Uk'otoa is insane. It can't be affected by most status effects. I believe the only one that it can be affected by was fear or frightened, and isn't weak to anything. Yasha and Kingsley then both start cutting up the body. Uk'otoa's eyes begin to glow, and lightning begins to float throughout the air. Jester casts Dawn on portions of Uk'otoa, dealing some good damage there, but he succeeds, so it only does half. Caleb jumps off the ship and transforms into a blue motherfucking dragon. That is awesome. I missed what the spell or what the object was that did this for him, but that's badass. Uk'otoa then goes for Bo, and then goes to bite her and tries to eat her, but is only able to deal a good chunk of damage, not able to fully swallow her. Ford then goes for the head, now that he has his Hexblade Curse up, and casts Cone of Cold on the head and a piece of the body. freezing the water around Ukatoa. Ukatoa then does a big lightning blast, dealing some good damage to everybody. Kingsley keeps slashing away, dealing a ton of damage due to sneak attacks because he's a well-built character. Really well-built. Wonder how different Campaign 2 would have been if he was still around. Would he have even gone into those rogue levels? I don't know. Probably not. Yasha herself keeps cutting away at things. Ukatoa then tries to turn Ford onto the party, but Ford is able to resist. Caleb then flies down and blasts Ukatoa and Bo with a gravity blast while in his dragon form still. Jester then invokes Duplicity. Ukatoa tries to move from Yasha, but Yasha grabs onto him and keeps him firm using Sentinel, because Sentinel's awesome. Ford then goes on the attack again, same as Kingsley. Bo holds on for dear life as she's still on the head. And at this point, she makes him weak to lightning, I believe. Yes. Ukatoa then tries to... Jeez, I'm losing myself here. Caleb then flies down and casts Chain Lightning on Ukatoa, dealing some good damage. Ukatoa then turns Ford successfully this time. Ford flies over to Jester. Jester, not knowing that he's being controlled at the moment, looks at him and then sees his eyes are now yellow and have dark slits in them. He then slashes at her twice, dealing a good chunk of damage. Once this is done, he turns back to normal, and Jester is able to keep her duplicates up, and then through them cast mass cure wounds, healing the party basically back to full as she had 700 points to divvy up, which is cracked. Like, that's insane. I think that might be like the most amount of healing we've seen in one turn from something in all of Critical Role so far. I'm not too sure. I'm sure Critical Role stats would be like, probably not, sir. But, I thought it was really cool. And like Laura said, it's character progression or character growth, which to me was great. It was a fun little moment, and everyone went bananas for it. Everyone continues to attack Ukatoa. Eventually, Ukatoa tries to slam Yasha. Kingsley tries to prevent this slam, but doesn't roll high enough to make it miss. Yasha then recklessly attacks, dealing 59 damage over 2 different strikes. Matt then asks the Mighty Nine how do they want to do this, led by Yasha. Yasha grabs Ukatoa's tail and holds onto him, and holds him in place, and calls for Ford. Ford yells to Caleb for some lightning, and he holds the Star Razor up high and flies toward Ukatoa. Caleb blasts the sword with lightning and then transforms into a dragon turtle and falls on top of Ukatoa, also holding him in place. Ford then hits Ukatoa with 4 Eldritch Blasts and throws the sword into the eye, giving it piercing damage and lightning damage. Ford flies up to Ukatoa to remove the sword to stab it one more time. Before that, Kingsley cuts a chunk of Ukatoa off him, getting himself some leather for later. Jester in the ship skips her way towards the end of it and grabs onto the tail and casts Inflict Wounds, turning it necrotic black. Veth jumps through Ford's portal and throws a Fluffernutter at Ukatoa. Glad I get to say Fluffernutter. That is one of the best things of all time. Ford stands before Ukatoa and goes to cut him down one last time. As he swings, a bomb intercepts the sword's path, blowing up in Ford's face and blowing up Ukatoa's face, but this sends Ford backwards. Ukatoa begins to sink to the bottom of the sea before it can feel he isn't quite dead yet. Caleb, the dragon turtle, grabs Ford, and they swim to the bottom, or swim after Ukatoa. Ford pushes off Caleb as Caleb isn't fast enough, and grabs a hold of Ukatoa. Calling on Zahir, he feels a burn in his chest, and his armor begins to burn away, which really sucks because the Mariner's armor was badass. This reveals all the markings all over Ford's body. The markings begin to move to Ukatoa, and after they are all on him, he disappears, and 3 cloven crystals remain in his place. Ford and Caleb surface. The Mighty Nine question if the orbs are active or not, but Ford feels that the cycle has started once again. He then feels inside himself to see if the Wild Mother or if Zahir are there, and they both are, but Zahir is much smaller, but it is a much more poignant feeling, similar to Ukatoa, but a little bit smaller, and it seems a lot stronger even with its smaller size. but eventually it's overwhelmed by the Wild Mother, and this is shown physically when the marking on Ford's chest is healed away by the Wild Mother's growth. He then divides the orbs up. One goes to the volcano on Rubble Cusp, where they once fought in Avocado. One goes to the Cobalt Soul, and one goes to only where he knows. Ford continues Stone's Throw shipping, growing it into something special. Bo returns to the Cobalt Soul to keep her work up and to keep her eye on the Cerberus assembly, and in the short term gets a foot rub from Yasha. Yasha gives Bo a foot rub and helps Veth run the camp. Veth runs the camp really well, which went really well, minus one death that Jester was able to undo, and this death was apparently at the hands of Yasha. Still the orphan maker, or I guess the parent, the childless maker? I don't know. But this, fortunately, helped sell next year's camp, as it sounded exciting that there was a little bit of danger. Jester starts an art studio right next to her old place and expands the old place with Ford. Kingsley works with Ford for a time, but after a while he gets his own ship and then leaves. And a few months later, they all receive a letter saying that they are no longer banned at Darktow by the new Plank King. Caleb takes up a teaching job at the Soldiers Academy and keeps an eye on his old friends, Astrid and Aedwulf. Teaches some people who weren't talented enough in the eyes of the Soldiers Academy to join, and from time to time waits for Essek to arrive so he can spend some time with him. And with that, for now, the story of the Mighty Nein has come to a close. And there you have it. The Mighty Nein Reunited Part 2 recap is complete. And I loved it. I loved 99% of this thing. I would say I love every second of it. I feel like there was one piece missing from all of this, and that was Vandrin. Where the fuck was Vandrin? Seriously, I feel like if there was one character from like everyone's backstory to include in all of this, it had to be Vandrin. But I then thought about it. Maybe Ford goes and gets him like after this whole Uk'otoa thing, and maybe that's where he puts the Cloven Crystal and like gives it to him and be like, here, you started this, let's finish it together. So I'm kind of over it at that point. That was literally the only complaint. I loved everything else. This entire thing was a ton of fun. The combat on the temple was amazing, and I was super engaged with it. Same with the fight over or in the water and on the boat and everything like that. That was amazing. That has to be one of the single coolest minis I've ever fucking seen. That's insane and makes me want to buy a 3D printer to make something like that, because that is so sick. That is simply one of the coolest minis I think I've ever seen. It was gorgeous. It was insanely painted. Whoever painted that is a paint god, and I'm jealous. It was fantastic. And everything else was amazing. Everyone played their characters perfectly, as if they had never really stopped playing. I mean, there's obviously some questions about their abilities, but as far as like character-wise, none of them skipped a beat. They all felt perfectly the Mighty Nein with all of their chaos and everything involved. So this was amazing. I personally believe this should have been just a part of Campaign 2, like back when it happened. But I'm glad they gave us this time to sort of, because time passed in real life and time passed in the game. So to me, it made a ton of sense. So yeah, definitely enjoyed this. I loved every second of it. It didn't turn into an EXU Kymel. Thank fucking God. I was so worried about, for whatever reason, Kymel scares me for 2 shots now. And I'm terrified of them. But this did really well. I loved every second of it. And obviously Matt was going to do well. I don't know why I was paranoid that 2 shots are scary. But yeah, this was amazing. I loved it. And it was so nice to see the animated intro once more. I just made a video on the intros for Critical Role. And if you watched it, you would know that animated intro is my favorite. So yeah, loved every second of this. It was so much fun. Can't wait for the Mighty Nein to come back, because I'm sure they will. They have to do the second part of Mighty Nein versus Vox Machina, right? That is something they have to do. I feel like it's a mandatory thing at this point. But who knows? Anyway, that is me for today. I will see you guys on Tuesday with whatever video I decide to do next. Peace.